What's up, guys? Nate Dog FPV here. Today we're going to be putting some LEDs on our 3-inch baby hawk. So you can see I've got 4 LEDs on the arms here, guys. These are actually red, kind of matches my red props and my red camera. You can pick these up from tinysleds.com. These have become really popular lately. I've seen a lot of people using them, seen a lot of different vendors carrying these. They're actually 3 to 6S rated for these particular ones. So this one has 3 LEDs on there. Then you can see you've got 2 solder pads for plus and positive and negative. But yeah, these are 3 to 6S rated, guys. So perfect for the baby hawk. Definitely make this thing glow. I've got another video, guys, where I kind of talk about Tiny's LEDs and show a little bit more about them. So you guys can check that out. I'll put a link to that video in the description. I also wanted to do a video on this one, guys, where I actually show the installation process. My baby hawk videos have been really popular and I think have been helpful for a lot of people. So I figured, hey, it'd be perfect to show that on the baby hawk. So we're going to cut to that, guys. You'll be able to see the entire installation process of how you install these on the baby hawk. So again, if you guys want to do this, should just be an easy, how-to video you can follow. We'll go ahead and power these on real quick so you guys can see what they look like. So power up the baby hawk, and boom. So 4 red LEDs. Again, guys, these things are super bright, looks super awesome at nighttime. We'll also throw in some flight footage at nighttime so you guys can see what this one actually looks like at night also. But again, yeah, really cool, guys, a lot of fun. If you guys are doing any racing or flying with other people, these things are super cool to have and install. It just makes everything look cool, makes your quad look cool. Definitely if you're out racing with people, you can see who's who with the LEDs, and it makes it a lot of fun, guys. So a lot of guys in my chapter have been installing these and we've been having a blast with them lately. And again, super easy to install, guys. They cost like $2 a piece, so really not expensive at all. So you guys should definitely get them, get some and try them out. Again, you can pick them up on tinysleds.com. So we're going to go ahead and cut to the build video, guys. So you'll be able to see that, the entire installation process. Like I said, I'm also going to throw in that nighttime footage so you guys can see this one flying at night and see how they look. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please subscribe, like, leave a comment, and we'll see you on the next one.
Alright guys, so here we go with a build video. I'm going to show you how we install the tiny LEDs on the Baby Hawk. So the first step here, we're going to take off the props. And again, we need ultimately, guys, we need to get down to the 4-in-1 ESE board to add the wires. So yeah, the first step here, taking off the props. So we're going to fast forward through that. Alright guys, got the props off. So the next step, we need to get the canopy off. So I'm going to point out the screws here. We've got 2 screws in the camera. And we also have 2 screws on the bottom of the back arms. Just don't need to take off all 3 back there, just the 2. The 2 I just pointed out there. So we're going to fast forward through that, guys, get all the screws taken off. Alright guys, so we got all the screws out. So the next step here, going to go ahead and pull off the canopy. Now you can see we've got our flight controller stack and our camera and everything exposed. So we need to get that flight controller and VTX out of the way. We need to get that camera out of there. So guys, we're going to go ahead and lift up on our camera. Just going to unplug that. All right, guys, and notice there, my case is actually cracked on the cameras that I was just looking at there. So actually, I'm going to replace that with an older camera that happens to be broken. Actually broke it like 6 months ago, but of course I saved my spare parts. You never know when you might need them. So I will be able to fix that one. We're going to replace that case and get it put back in here later. So guys, at this point I am cutting the zip tie on my VTX antenna. So if you guys saw one of my earlier build videos for this 3-inch Baby Hawk, I moved the VTX antenna to the back arm. I also moved the capacitor and I moved the XT30 to the other arm and zip tie those there in place. And again, guys, that just helps keep everything nice and neat, keeps them out of the way, keeps them from, hitting things or getting messed up when you get in a crash or something. So if you guys haven't seen that video, definitely check it out. Kind of go through the whole setup of the Baby Hawk and those mods I just mentioned. So at this point, guys, I just took all these screws off of the VTX. There's only going to be 3 of them because of the way the VTX is shaped. So I got those screws taken off, guys. So now we're going to go ahead and lift up our VTX, and it should just pop right off the flight controller. It does have pins that go from the bottom of the VTX into the flight controller. So guys, be careful when you're taking off the VTX. You definitely don't want to bend those pins or cause any problems. So just be careful when you're lifting it up that you don't, bend it too far to one side or anything so it doesn't damage the pins. As you can see, guys, I just got it pulled up there. Also got my receiver that just sticks to the top of the VTX with double-sided tape. So we're kind of moving that out of the way as well. So now we can see we've got our flight controller exposed. So the next step here, guys, we need to take the standoffs off of the flight controller so we can pull it off as well. Notice I'm pointing out the standoffs now. There is one that's a little bit different, guys. The upper right standoff is actually longer, a little bit longer than the back two standoffs. The reason for that, they want the VTX to be angled when it's sitting in the Baby Hawk so you can see it better in the canopy and you can get to the button a little bit easier. So just remember, guys, the longer standoff goes in the upper right corner. And you got 2 medium-sized standoffs in the back, and you've got 1 nut in the upper left. So taking all those off, so now we're going to go ahead and lift the flight controller up off the 4-in-1 ESE board. The flight controller also has pins just like the VTX does. So again, when you're lifting that up, be careful. So you can see I've got mine off now, guys. So really the flight controller, VTX, receiver, that's all like one little combo kind of stuck together there. So I'm just going to pull it off, set it over to the side. So now you can see I've got my 4-in-1 ESU board exposed. You can see some red and blue wire there, guys. That's actually the wire from the capacitor mod where I moved the capacitor back to the arm. So basically what I do is just unsolder the capacitor, add a little bit of wires to the leads on the capacitor, and then I solder those wires where the capacitor was initially soldered to. So there's actually like pins on top of the XT30 mount. Um, so yeah, guys, we're actually going to attach our LED wires to that same location where those capacitor wires are, red and black accordingly, or positive and negative accordingly. So we're going to use that for the power for our LEDs. That's one of the cool things about these LEDs also, guys, is they can run on 3 to 6S actually, so you can actually run full battery power through these LEDs. So at this point, guys, I'm making a couple little short pieces of wire, one red, one black, and these are going to be little extensions that are going to solder to where the capacitor leads go, and we're going to ultimately attach some additional wire onto these that we're going to use for the LED wires. So the first step, guys, yeah, I'm getting those 2 little short pieces of wire ready. I just got those fluxed up, soldered up, tinned up, so we'll be able to solder those on. So this next step I'm doing here, guys, I'm actually measuring out my longer piece of wire. So I'm kind of seeing how long I need it to go, or how long it needs to be to go from the middle of the ESE board over to the arm. And I'm going to measure it all the way to the edge of the arm. I don't really need it to go that far necessarily, but I'd rather have, extra wire than not have enough. The kind of wire I'm using for this, guys, is actually 26 gauge silicone wire. I picked this up off Amazon. I'll put a link to that down in the description. It's actually called like the box, but they have different gauges of wire you can get. Box comes with 5 spools of wire, 5 different colors. And again, silicone wire is just so much easier to work with, guys. Perfect for hobbies. And again, you can just strip it with your fingertips. You don't have to have pliers or scissors or anything like that. And again, that silicone wire is, just so easy to work with. Has definitely made a huge difference for me and all my hobbies. So yeah, highly recommend picking up some of that, guys. It costs about 20 bucks a box if you buy it off Amazon. But again, for me, it's been totally worth it. So at this point, I'm gonna get each one of those longer wires tinned up. So you can see I strip off a little bit there, I give it a twist, add some flux to it, and then I just tin it up with my soldering iron. And then I'm gonna use a towel to wipe off the excess flux. All right, guys, so we're getting each one of those wires tinned up now. Again, doing a super fast forward on this part. No point in dragging it out, guys. Going to be pretty much the same process for each wire. So finishing that up now, guys. So we've got each one of those wires soldered up, or tinned up, I should say. So now we're going to get ready to bridge the four wires together with the single wires. So yeah, guys, I'm going to be taking the four longer wires. We're going to give them a little bit of twist, or a little twist on the end to twist them together. Then we're going to solder that to our one single wire, our shorter wire, and we're going to attach the shorter one to the capacitor pins. And then we'll have the four longer wires are going to be like the four positives for our LEDs. So kind of showing that process now, guys. Again, I got to twist it together, add some flux, and do the solder. That looks good. We're going to clean it off with a towel, and we're going to move on, getting ready for the black one as well, guys. Of course, I'm double checking my solder there as well, guys, making sure it looks good. Typically, your solder joint should look shiny. If you ever end up with a solder joint and it looks like it's just not shiny or it's kind of dull looking, it could be like a cold solder or a cold joint. So definitely, guys, flux is a big thing that will help that and make sure you get good solder joints. So there we go, guys. We've got the black one done now as well. So we're gonna get ready to get those attached. Of course, the next thing we need to do is add some heat shrink, guys. Obviously, we want to heat shrink over that exposed part of wire on the red and black there. And again, guys, keep in mind these wires are going to be sitting on top of your 4-in-1 ESE board. Obviously, with Baby Hawks, everybody knows about the shorting issue where, Emax released those with the 4-in-1 ESE too close to the carbon fiber and caused a bunch of peoples to catch on fire and stuff like that. So that definitely is something that can happen, guys. Obviously, I put nuts under my 4-in-1 ESE board to take care of that problem. I'll talk about that in my early video with setting up the Baby Hawk, so you guys can check that out as well if you haven't seen it already. But yeah, I've got the heat shrink on those now, guys. You can see the red and black are ready to go. I also like to push down on my heat shrink a little bit, guys, after I hit it with a heat gun, just to make sure it sticks good. So at this point, moving on, guys, we're going to be soldering the short little leads to the capacitor pins. Obviously, red will be positive, black will be negative. So I'm kind of showing that now, guys, just getting that little piece of wire, or the shorter piece of wire, tinned up, and we're going to solder it onto the positive capacitor pin. Now, of course, I'm not taking off the capacitor wire while I'm doing this, so I'm basically just leaving it on the pin and I'm just adding the other one to it. Easiest way to do that, guys, just kind of hold both wires with your left hand. And then, of course, I'm just hitting it with a soldering iron with my right hand, and we just put both wires on the same pin. Notice I'm using a Q-tip there to clean off the excess flux. So guys, I usually use a towel for that, but sometimes it can be hard, like getting that towel down into the 4-in-1 ESE board or whatever you may be, trying to clean the flux off of. Maybe it's a flight controller or something. So a Q-tip works great for that, guys. So notice I just cleaned that one up there. So we've got the red one attached, guys. We're moving on to the black wire now. Just got it soldered up using our Q-tip to clean off the extra flux. And moving right along, guys. All right, so now you can see I'm kind of positioning the wires, guys. Obviously, we need a red and a black on each arm, so I'm kind of dislocating those and repositioning them where they need to be, guys, so we'll have one on each arm. So we got that done. Next step, guys, we're going to be putting our flight controller back on. So again, we said earlier that the flight controller has pins on the bottom of it, so be careful when you put it back on, guys. Make sure it lines up on the 4-in-1 ESE board correctly. And again, take your time on this part. You don't want to bend the pins or, mess up that connection. So take your time putting it back on. Make sure all your wires are in a good location as well. And there's plenty of room, guys, for those wires to be between the 4-in-1 ESE board and the flight controller. But yeah, just make sure that your wires aren't like pinched in between the standoffs and the flight controller or anything like that. And of course, everything should work out good for you. So that's kind of what I'm doing here now, guys, taking my time, getting it, making sure everything's attached correctly, wires aren't being pinched, give that flight controller a good push to make sure it's pushed down all the way. All right, so that's looking good. So the next step, guys, we're going to put our standoffs back on. So again, we said the longer standoff goes in the upper right corner, two medium standoffs go in the back, and then we're just going to have a single nut on the upper left corner. So getting those put back on now, guys. Again, we'll super fast forward through that. Trying to keep this video as short as possible, guys, while also being very descriptive and kind of show every step of the way as far as how to get these LEDs attached and wired up and everything. So hopefully it'll be helpful for you guys. All right, so we've got our flight controller back on now. So now we need to get our VTX back on. Kind of the same thing with that, guys. It has the pin, so be careful when you reattach it. Make sure it gets pushed down good. You can kind of see there it's kind of angled towards the back. Again, don't be alarmed by that, guys. That's by design. That's why Emax puts that longer standoff on the front. And again, that kind of tilts the VTX back, but that actually makes it easier to see the screen through the canopy, and it also makes it easier to get to the button on the VTX, guys. So that's why it's kind of slanted backwards. But yeah, guys, getting that back on now. And of course, putting the nuts back on top of the VTX, making sure all those are good and tight. And we'll continue on. Alright, so we've got the stack pretty much back together now, guys. I'm just sticking my receiver back on top of that double-sided tape on the VTX. Getting my camera wire ready to go again. And again, right now just kind of tucking that camera wire back as far as possible because I want to make sure I have room for everything. And of course now tucking in my receiver wires also. Um, Guys, I know a lot of people say it's not a good idea to tuck your receiver wires up in the body, but I've done that on all my baby hot skies without any problem. I don't like wires hanging out the side or sticking out all over the place. So that's just how I do it, guys. I tuck the receiver wires up under the 4-in-1 ESE board, but again, that's always worked out great for me. All right, guys, so now we're putting our camera back on, and I did switch that case, guys. Of course, that was off camera, but I did switch out that case for one that's not broken. So again, that'll be on there good. Definitely, guys, when you're tightening up your camera, be careful not to over tighten it because you can crack the canopy, or like you saw in mine there, you might even crack the case of the camera. So yeah, guys, be careful with that. Again, don't want to over tighten it. So we've got everything back on stack wise, guys. Got the camera back on. So now I'm re-adding the camera screws and our canopy screws. And again, putting in the two short ones on the front, then we'll have the two long ones in the back. Alright guys, so that's looking good. So at this point, I'm just kind of getting my wires routed back on the arms, kind of seeing exactly where I want them. So alright, yeah, so at this point, guys, again, getting the wires where I need them to be on the arms. Of course, you're going to need to trim those. Like I said, I made them a little bit long, so I had plenty of wire to work with. But obviously, we want the LEDs attached to the bottom of the arms, so the wires, can't be sticking off the arms. So that's kind of what I'm doing now, guys. I'm going to go along and trim up each one of those wires and make sure they're the right length to solder on the LEDs. Again, guys, we're going to fast forward through trimming the rest of the wires. No reason to drag that part out. All right, so notice on the last arm, guys, I'm actually cutting the zip ties on my XT30 and capacitor. Again, I'm just doing that, guys, so I can get those wires the right length, get them ready for the LEDs, and of course we'll zip tie that XT30 and capacitor back down once we get the LEDs installed. Alright guys, so at this point now we're working on tinning up our first set of LED wires. And again, we'll have to go around and do this for each one of our LED wires, guys, getting those ready for the LEDs to go on. So notice here I'm doing each one of those, making sure those are ready to go. Alright guys, so our next step here, I'm going to be getting out the heat shrink I'm going to be using to cover up the LEDs. Notice I got me a little box of heat shrink. I picked this up off Amazon, guys. It's all clear heat shrink. So getting out the correct size for the LEDs, I'm just going to kind of measure here and see about how long I need it to be. Then I'm going to get out the clear, as much clear heat shrink as I need to be able to cover up my LEDs after I get them soldered on. Alright guys, so we got our heat shrink ready. At this point now I'm taking the tape off of the arms. Guys, I do actually wrap electrical tape around the entire arm and cover up those motor wires. When Emax ships these, they only have a little bit of tape on them. The problem with that, guys, if you're flying, around trees or something like I do, if you get a motor wire caught on a branch or something, it could rip it out of the motor. Then, of course, you're going to be down a motor. So, guys, I just like to go ahead and electrical tape the arms completely. Make sure those motor wires are covered up as much as possible. That way you don't have to worry about getting in a crash or something like that and, wires getting ripped out of your motors. So at this point, guys, we're soldering up or tinning up our LEDs. So again, you've got a positive and a minus pad on each one of the LEDs. So I'm just adding a little bit of flux, a little bit of solder there. Now at this point, I'm going to get those LEDs soldered onto our red and black wires. And again, guys, the way I'm doing this, I just kind of hold the LED up to the wire and solder it that way. I'm not really using a helping hand or anything for this part. You certainly can use a helping hand if it makes it easier for you. But for me, guys, I was able to install these pretty easy by just holding the LED in my hand, getting it up under the wire, and just adding the wire. So we're going to go around at this point, guys, and do each one of these ESCs and get them, sorry, not ESCs, LEDs. We're going to go around and do each one of the LEDs, guys, and get those soldered on. Alright guys, so at this point we've got all the LEDs soldered on. Next step we're going to do is plug in a battery and just make sure they all work. I'm going to use a 3S battery to test this, guys. And again, the main reason I'm testing it now is that I would hate to get the heat shrink and everything on, then realize one of the LEDs isn't working. So go ahead and test those, guys, as soon as you get them soldered on. So we can see there all four of them are lit up, so that's good to go. So we're going to unplug the battery and continue on with the build process. So the next step, guys, we're going to be adding some heat shrink over the LEDs to cover each one up. So again, I'm going to kind of measure out my length here, exactly how long the piece needs to be, guys. Then I'm going to use my scissors to cut down the heat shrink, and then we're going to add that on each one of the LEDs. Alright, so you can see, guys, at this point I am heat shrinking the first LED, just kind of holding the quad and just letting the wire hang while I solder it on. Notice at the end I kind of grab the heat shrink, guys, and again I'm just doing that to make sure it's on there good and tight. I don't want it slipping off or anything like that. Again, you wouldn't want those LED pads, shorting on your arms or something like that. So definitely take your time, make sure you get them heat shrinked and covered up well. So you can see I'm zipping around real quick doing each one of those. Alright guys, so now we've got our LEDs heat shrinked. Next step, I'm going to be adding some tape back onto the arms to cover up those motor wires. And again, the reason I took off the tape earlier, I wanted to make sure that, for one, the motor wires were in a good location, and I also wanted to make sure that, the way I was getting the LED wires positioned was going to work out correctly. So now that I've got that kind of figured out, now I'm going to add the tape back onto each arm to completely cover up those motor wires. And you'll see I'm going to go ahead and get this first LED mounted. So I actually twisted it around several times, guys, to get the red and black wire kind of in a twist pattern. To me, that just looks cleaner, and kind of helps keep it out of the way. So once I get that on, I'm using a black zip tie to actually attach the LED to the arm. Now I'm actually putting the zip tie over the third LED basically that's kind of in the middle of the LED board, and that's just to try to keep everything balanced on the arm. I would recommend using some clear zip ties actually, that way it's not like blocking out one of the LEDs. But again guys, I didn't have any clear zip ties at this point, so I just used the black ones that I had. Later on I probably will be changing those out for some clear zip ties so you can definitely see all three LEDs. But for now I'm going to have like two of them kind of covered up because again all I had was the black zip ties to use at the time. So yeah, now guys, we're moving on to the next one. So like we're going to go around with the tape and tape up each one of the arms. Alright guys, so we got all the arms taped up now. So we're going to go ahead and finish mounting our LEDs. Again, using that same zip tie method for each one. Of course, when you get back to the one where the VTX antenna is, that's going to be a little bit different. I'm actually going to use the same zip tie to hold on the VTX antenna and to hold the LED on. So basically just kind of take your time with positioning on that, make sure you get both of them in there correctly, and get that zip tie good and tight so everything will hold on well. Alright guys, so working on the last arm now. You can see how that's for the one where the capacitor and the XT30 connector are. So the first way, or the first thing I'm doing guys, I'm going to go ahead and get the zip tie mounted, or get the LED mounted with its own zip tie. After that's on, then I'm going to add a couple more zip ties that are actually going to hold the capacitor and the XT30 connector on. So really guys, on this arm there's actually going to be three zip ties, one on the LED and there's going to be two on the XT30 and the capacitor. And again, I recommend doing it that way just to make sure the XT30 and capacitor are held on there well and they're not going to be moving around. So I got that on there guys. Now I'm just kind of pushing down the heat shrink on that LED to make sure everything's clean. So now guys, we're going to plug it in again. So now we can see everything looks good.